How's it going, everybody? This is Todd Abedrabbo. Hope you're having a great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright folks, it is the one video that I have dreaded making the most this year. However, since after this video it will be the big night next Tuesday, I am going to have to make it. It is my 2024 United States presidential election video, and I'm going to be honest with you, I thought 2020 was a crazy election. Let me tell you what, this one might be a little bit more crazier, and there has been a lot that has happened this year that has made this election very unprecedented. So I'll share with you a little bit about what has happened so far, my thoughts on the election overall, and who I am voting for in this year's presidential election. Now, if he were still in this, Joe Biden would have been running for re-election right now. He is near the end of his first term and obviously would have been eligible for a second term. However, as we all know previously, he is obviously of elderly age, obviously 81, now almost 82, and a lot of people have really questioned whether he was mentally and physically capable of being able to do a second term should he be elected president again. Obviously, I do know that, there could have been some instances where he could have done it, but obviously those questions were legitimate, especially since, what happened the last time when Ronald Reagan was serving as president at the age that he was. I didn't think there was really much issue with Joe Biden. However, the first presidential debate that happened in June 27th really exposed him, and obviously, like I said before in my social media, it was really sad to see what happened there. I mean, obviously, we all know that this caused a whole lot of blowback and a lot more concerns about him, and ultimately, he had no choice but to step away from the presidential race and step down at the end of this term. He made that announcement official on July 21st, and I was among the very few in the camp that was hoping that he would not drop his re-election campaign, but obviously, based on what has happened recently, I do understand now why he did that, and ultimately I do feel like that it was probably for the best. Obviously, he did have a few issues. Obviously, we mentioned the war in Gaza, inflation being a major issue, though that has been mostly tamed, and ultimately a whole bunch of other issues in regards to foreign policy, particularly the war in Ukraine and, immigration and all that stuff. So Joe Biden was not a perfect president, as I mentioned in my 2020 video. Obviously, he does have quite a bit of faults, and that does put a little bit of a stain on his presidency. But overall, he did definitely bring back bipartisanship in some ways during his term as U.S. president, and I do believe that he deserves a lot of credit for that, and I do feel like that he will go down as perhaps one of the most successful one-term presidents in United States history. And his record says it for itself, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the American Rescue Plan, and ultimately, brokering some other foreign policy deals, and ultimately just, bringing back in some ways bipartisanship in DC, and also cutting back on a lot of student loans too. He has definitely done a number of things to help make this country better. There are a lot more that's on my head that I can't think of, but obviously, like I said before, it's a shame that he had to drop his re-election bid, but obviously I understand now why he did, because obviously, he definitely has aged quite a bit during his term as U.S. president, but either way, he will definitely be missed at the end of this term. I definitely believe that he deserves a lot of credit. But obviously, with Joe Biden stepping aside now, this means obviously we now have two new candidates in the spotlight, and ultimately taking Biden's place as the Democratic nominee happens to be his vice president, which is Kamala Harris. Now, obviously, she was elected vice president alongside Biden back in 2020, becoming the first woman to ever occupy that position or the presidency. Obviously, she would be the very first female president in United States history if she was to be elected on November 5th next week. And so obviously, we will just have to see exactly whether or not fate goes in her favor next week. I'm going to be honest with you, I had a lot of concerns that she was not going to be able to pull it off, especially since, she only stepped into the top of the ticket in mid-July. That only gave her like less than 100 days to be able to really put a campaign together and really just make something happen. But let me tell you something, what she has done the last 100 days, it has definitely been worth celebrating. She has done a really good job, in my opinion, of being able to really make her favorability ratings better and ultimately really make her case a being the first female president in United States history. Now, it was not perfect though. As I mentioned before, I am slightly centrist despite the fact that I'm leaning liberal. She does have her faults. The first thing is that she's not been very clear on most of her policy issues, and obviously I do wish that she would explain a little bit more in regards to what she would do with the economy and ultimately immigration and ultimately a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I do feel like that is a little bit frustrating, especially since, even though this election is basically based more on character than it is policy, it is still very important. And I do feel like that she needs to do a better job at clarifying most of her stances in regards to that. I also feel like that, she probably could have done a lot more campaigning, obviously. Yes, I understand that she obviously has her duties as vice president, but ultimately, if you are running for president, you gotta be out there campaigning a lot. And ultimately, she was not doing a whole lot of that after the first debate. And I do feel like that, she should have been out there a whole lot more, because that's exactly why the race is as close as it is in the first place. Even though if it was any other person representing the Republican Party for the presidential nomination, which I'll share with you in just a little bit, this probably would be a rout for the GOP right now. So yeah, she definitely has not been perfect, and I definitely do have my concerns in regards to her. But ultimately though, 100 days from July all the way to now, look, she can still lose this, but ultimately, she has done a pretty good job, in my opinion. And I definitely feel like that if she somehow pulls it off, I definitely feel like that this will go down as one of the greatest turnarounds that I think I've ever seen. But again, that really depends on what happens next week. As for the Republican Party, it is same old in regards to the nominee. It is the 45th US president in Donald Trump. Obviously, as we all know, he was voted out of office at the end of 2020 as a result of his actions during the COVID pandemic, and what I believe was an election he probably should have won, but ultimately that didn't happen. But he is trying to claim the throne back and ultimately try to become the 47th president in United States history. He would only become the second person to reclaim the US presidency after losing his office literally the term before. The other person that did that, Grover Cleveland, and that was back during the 1800s. Now, I do believe he definitely does have some advantages, obviously. Number one, he has been campaigning quite a bit over the last few weeks to try to rebuild his image after that disastrous debate with Kamala Harris, and I do feel like that he has done a pretty good job at that. And also, I do believe that he has done some good leeway in regards to trying to gain some more voters, obviously. He has definitely made some inroads in regards to male voters and definitely some minority voters as well, African-American voters, Latino voters, and ultimately a whole bunch of those voters in between. So he has definitely done some good work in regards to building up his base in regards to that. But again, you gotta remember, it's been 4 years since he was voted out of office and ultimately committing the horrific events that took place on January 6th in 2021. But really, again, that's just 3 years ago, and I'm sure that's not on a whole lot of people's minds right now. But ultimately, you gotta remember, his behavior still has not changed. And just like with Joe Biden, he too has his issues in regards to his memory and his age ultimately as well. And the fact that, he is 78 right now, he would be the oldest elected president ever, which would be a year older than Joe Biden when he was elected back in 2020 against Donald Trump. And ultimately, there have been signs during his campaign where he definitely looked off at times, but not always. Ultimately, you gotta remember though, he thrives during his rallies when he's getting cheered on by his supporters, and ultimately that does drive him up. Again, I'm not bashing him for anything. I do know that he has a real dedicated group of supporters, obviously, and give him credit for that. He definitely has earned those supporters, but he definitely has really risked throwing them away, especially last week when he had a speaker at his rally at Madison Square Garden in which he ultimately said that, Puerto Ricans or a garbage island or something like that. That has cost him quite a bit of Puerto Rican voters and probably could risk his standing with Latino voters overall. And ultimately, his behavior, like I said before, is not changed. And at times, it has also gotten worse. So I definitely feel like that he probably should have toned it down in regards to his behavior. Plus, there have been some states that he has campaigned in that I really question. New York, like I said before, New Mexico, and Virginia, all that stuff, states that obviously were not going to be competitive in the first place. I don't understand why he is campaigning in those areas when he probably should have been focusing on the 7 swing states, but hey, it's his campaign. He does what he wants. But again, there have definitely been some signs that he has definitely improved in regards to his base, and obviously pollsters are seeing that, and they are trying not to underestimate him this time around. Is there a possibility that he could be overestimated this time? Maybe, but probably by the slightest of chances. But either way though, there are some signs that he has some strength in regards to that, and if he wins next week, it will definitely show. But yeah, in regards to this election, these are really the two candidates that we have had to deal with, and ultimately they are definitely not perfect, and like I said before, they both have their faults. My big concern though is what happens after November 5th, particularly if Donald Trump is elected, because he has said a lot of crazy things that he said that he is going to do in regards to the economy, immigration and all of that stuff that could really risk putting a real stain on democracy, and ultimately that could really cause a huge problem in regards to our relations with other nations as well. So obviously I do have a lot of fears in regards to what will happen to that in regards to that aspect. I also have some concerns in regards to Kamala Harris. Obviously, like I said before, a woman has never really sat foot at the top step of US politics, like I said before. So this would be unfamiliar territory for somebody of her gender. How is she going to deal with foreign policy, speaking with foreign leaders and all that stuff? How is she going to handle with all the stuff that's going on at the border, or everything that's happening in regards to the economy and all that stuff? I do feel like that there should be a lot of questions that should really be made about her there, especially since she is the vice president of the United States right now underneath Joe Biden. Obviously those concerns about her having a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency, I do believe that they are found. I definitely feel like that there are a lot of worries in regards to what she might do, and again, like I said before, I really wish that she would clarify that more. But again, it is what it is. These are the two candidates that we're going to have to work with, and so ultimately, like I said before, it's just all about turnout, and really both these campaigns have their advantages and also their disadvantages, and I definitely feel like that it's going to be very interesting to see exactly who can turn out more of their supporters come the end of the election next week. Now, like I said before, this election has been much crazier than it was in 2020 because there has been a slew of major events that's really flipped this campaign upside down. Like I said before, questions about age in regards to both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and especially after what happened at the first debate. Then ultimately you have the swap of candidates from the president to the vice president at the top of the ticket. That's only happened like a couple other times before, the most recent time being in 1968. Both of those previous times, it failed miserably. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the third time is the charm. And then of course, as we all know, the concerns of Donald Trump and what he will do if he returns to the Oval Office. And like I said before, it's just caused so much division here in this country. Again, obviously, as I said before, I am slightly liberal, but I also have a good amount of conservative views as well. Hence why I lean specifically towards the center. And I definitely feel like that, that gap in between the center along with the Democrats and Republicans is definitely grown significantly. And I do feel like that we are now in a real polarized state that I feel like it's going to become that much harder no matter what happens after next week to be able to really heal those divisions and bring everything back together. I really thought after the end of the last election that we would find a way to be able to do that. January 6th, we were exposed that things were only going to get worse, and literally that unfortunately has come true because I have never seen an election where the polarization and ultimately both sides of the political spectrum are literally so divided. It's a shame because I remember at least prior to 2016, obviously you had candidates on both parties that ultimately would share the disagreements with each other, but ultimately would share some common ground. And ultimately, that's exactly what I feel like that politics should be like in DC. It really should be boring, I do feel like that for the most part, everything should be all right. And ultimately, everybody can get along, pass a whole lot of laws, and ultimately make life better for all of Americans. But like I said before, the last few years have shown that unfortunately there has been a real growing symptom in regards to our division, in regards to our politics and our everyday life here in America. It has unfortunately grown to a level that I thought I would have never seen. Combine that with the possibility of more political political violence, and ultimately, the overturn of Roe v. Wade and the war in Gaza and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you're now looking at a presidential election in which is so divided that literally we just have no idea exactly what's going to happen next week. I know for a fact that, there have been a lot of people that have been saying that Kamala Harris is going to win by a landslide. There's been a lot of people on social media saying Donald Trump is going to win in a landslide. Me personally, I just don't know what's going to happen, because obviously, as I said before, you cannot really determine anything until the final vote is counted next week. We saw that happen in 2000, we saw what happened in 2016, we saw what happened in 2020, and obviously we will see that same thing again here in 2024. And this is why when I said in my 2020 video that I would like for everything to be civil, because I do believe that there is some common ground that we can ultimately really find within each other. It really doesn't matter what party we are, whether or not you're a Democrat, whether or not you're a Republican, or you are an independent. Obviously, like I said before, there's still a chance that we can get some bipartisanship and common ground. But ultimately, the divisions have to be healed, and ultimately, everybody has to come back together to try to have a United States again, and ultimately have some good times in regards to politics again. We have not had that for almost a decade, and I definitely hope that after this election, though I'm probably not going to get my hopes up on that, we will hopefully find a way to be able to find a way to bring civility back in our country and ultimately pretend that the last 10 years did not ever happen. So yeah, just remember that for when you vote next Tuesday, or if you have already voted already, yes, it is okay to disagree with everybody else. It is okay to ultimately have your own opinions on some things. But hey, what matters at the end of the day is that bipartisanship matters more than it has before. And I definitely hope that we will see an era in politics in which we can have bipartisanship again. What will happen after this election next week? I really don't know. But I do hope that at some point we will finally break away from the divisions of this nation and really bring together a united country once more. And hopefully we'll be back on a brighter road to a better future for the United States. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on the election overall, but now I'm going to share with you who I am going to be voting for next Tuesday. Now, obviously, last time that we had the presidential election because of COVID, I had to vote by mail. However, this time I am planning to vote on election day next Tuesday. And so obviously, this was a really difficult choice. And obviously, I really don't know if Kamala Harris really has what it takes to succeed as president. And obviously, we all know that Donald Trump is probably going to do a lot of crazy things as president. And I'm going to be honest with you, even if Joe Biden was still the nominee, I probably would still vote for him over Donald Trump. And also, and I do say this seriously, I am not kidding when I say it, if the GOP had nominated somebody like Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, heck, maybe even Doug Burgum and all that stuff, hey, I definitely would consider voting for that person in the GOP over whoever the Democratic nominee is, whether or not it was Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Because in my opinion, I definitely feel like that, considering the way things are at right now, the GOP should probably be running away with this election right now. But instead, they have to just stick with the crazy and Donald Trump, obviously. So obviously, that's the only reason why it is still close right now. And like I said before, the swap with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, obviously that's given me a lot of pause and ultimately, a lot of questions as to whether or not she could do it. So this was a really difficult choice for me this time than it was back in 2020, because again, I really don't know exactly what's going to happen after November 5th in regards to our country. But ultimately, in the end, I do feel like that character matters and decency as well. And ultimately, that's the reason why next Tuesday, when I head to the ballot box, I will be voting for Jill Stein. Oh, no. I'm just kidding. Jill Stein, nah. I'm not voting for that Green Party garbage, obviously. I'm not doing that. I'm just kidding on that. My vote is going to be for Kamala Harris next Tuesday, and I'm going to vote for her as the first female president of the United States and the 47th president in United States history. Again, like I said before, I do have a lot of questions in regards to whether or not I do feel like she can succeed as president, especially since of what she has done so far as vice president. Obviously, there's been a lot of good things and also a lot of bad as well. So it really remains to be seen what she can do. But ultimately, I do feel like that she would make a better president than Donald Trump in regards to everything that we have seen so far and ultimately character as well. So again, again, it will be one of the greatest miracles in United States history if she can pull this off literally less than 100 days after she stepped up to the top of the ticket. But hey, if she can pull it off, that will be one of the craziest and perhaps greatest miracles in the history of this country. And ultimately, like I said before, in this election, character matters a whole lot more than you think. And in regards to that, that's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris next Tuesday. That being said, I am prepared for whatever outcome happens. Like I said before, you're seeing a whole lot of polls over the last few weeks that showed a tied race, a Harris lead, or a Trump lead. Literally, we just don't know what's going to happen next Tuesday. And literally, anybody that says they do, literally, I don't know what they're looking at. Because let's face it, this is going to come down to the Rust Belt states and also the Sun Belt states as well. There's a possibility that neither candidate reaches 300 electoral votes. So literally, we're just gonna have to see what happens from here. Again, I'm just basing my vote based on what I have seen so far and what both candidates have really offered as of this point. So obviously, you know, there's a possibility that we could see a Harris victory next Tuesday, and there's a possibility that we could see a Trump victory next Tuesday. So I'm preparing myself for potentially one of those two outcomes right there. And I feel like that everybody should be doing that same thing as well. You can't assume anything at this point. So obviously, we're just gonna have to watch for all the votes to be counted next week and see exactly what happens. But again, no matter what happens after next week, hopefully we will be able to bring bipartisanship back in politics and in America, because I feel like that now is the time that we finally go ahead and put aside the division that we have seen over the last decade and a half. And ultimately, that's exactly where I lean on in regards to the spectrum here. Now again, like I said before, in regards to this election, I would have still voted for Joe Biden even if he was still in this race, though I would have had a little bit more concerns in regards to him. And again, had it been anybody other than Donald Trump as a GOP nominee, I probably would have voted for them, obviously. But again, we are dealt with the two candidates that we have right here, and so I just had to go with whoever had the best character, and ultimately I do feel like that Kamala Harris represents that. Now again, you are free to disagree with me in the comments section, and I encourage disagreement, but like I said before, you know, civility matters, and I definitely would like to have friendlier discussions in regards to what you think might happen next week, and ultimately what we have seen so far. So if you disagree with me or agree with me, or if you have your own predictions in regards to what's going to happen next week, hey, let me know down in the comments below. I'll definitely interact with you and see exactly why you think of that and why I'm interested in your opinions about it. But again, please, let's be civil about it. If I see any negative comments, I will take action, and I really don't want to do that. So please, let's keep it civil in the comments below, because I will definitely be reading them. But yeah, obviously in America, we do have the freedom to vote, and obviously it is important that we exercise the right to vote. So if you haven't done so already, if there is still an early vote going on in your state, please go ahead and do so. It's obviously very important that you get your vote in, and ultimately, if you're planning to wait for election day, please make sure that you vote before time is up, because like I said before, if you don't think your vote matters in this election, think again. It does, and ultimately it is going to affect the future of our country. And so if you haven't done so already, because I will next Tuesday, please go out there and exercise your right to vote, because this election is all too important to sit out. Whether you're a Kamala Harris fan or a Donald Trump fan, it is very important to make your voice heard. So go out and vote next week and represent your great country of the United States of America. Alright, and that is going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's blogs, projects, or challenges, you name it. Leave it in the comments below, I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media, all the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you're having another great day. And as always, hope to see you all again in another video very soon. So long, everybody.